You are listening to the Examine Life with Bram Levinson. For years, I have been talking to people in a coaching slash mentoring context, and very often some of the guidance that I will give them will be to make decisions that they can be proud of, to make decisions that they can look back on and feel proud of, feel happy with. And in many cases, those decisions are decisions that work for them, that don't necessarily work for other people, but that really work for them. And I guess this sort of feeds right back into this whole concept of not prioritizing other people's experiences over our own, but rather really prioritizing this individual path that every single one of us has, and that I believe every single one of us is meant to not only follow, but is meant to do so in a way that amplifies our own individuality. I've spoken ad nauseum before about, and many of you have heard me talk about it before, about these things that make us different from each other. These characteristics are meant to be amplified. They're meant to be looked at. They're meant to be, how can I put this? Like, let your freak flag fly, that kind of thing. They're meant to be sort of out there for people to know about, because we don't find what we're looking for by cloning each other and by being carbon copies of each other. We find what we're looking for by being comfortable in ourselves, in the world, and knowing that there is space for us. And I believe there is ultimately space for all of us, which is a controversial thing to say when, we are kind of conditioned economically to believe that there isn't enough to go around. And that's why issues with immigration seem to be such a problem and so heightened at this point in time, because there are many people who believe that what is mine, and what is available in my country should be available to me, and it shouldn't be available to anybody else who isn't from here. And I think that's one of the greatest gaslighting campaigns that will ever happen globally. A campaign that convinces people to believe that there isn't enough to go around. If we're responsible with how we live and how we manage everything, there is absolutely enough to go around. But we've got to get used to doing it. It's not something that's just going to happen all of a sudden. We've had decades and decades and decades of being told that, it's about me. It's about me. It's whatever I want, I can have. And while that can be a great thing to learn, it can't be exclusive. Nothing is ever one thing. So we can't just be thinking about ourselves and believe that that's going to somehow lead to happiness or to contentment or to finding anything we think we're going to find, because it can't. Yes, we can think about ourselves, but we should be thinking about everyone else in the process and understanding that from everyone else's point of view, we are everyone else, right? So everybody thinks that they are the center of their own universe. Newsflash. That's not going to bring us anywhere good. And ultimately, what we will learn, and I think what we are learning, is that there is enough to go around, but we're going to have to change the way we live. We're going to have to change the way we think, which is happening as well. And in the process, we will be taught. Part of our higher education, our life learning, will be teaching us that there is enough for all of us, provided we make certain changes to how we consume, to what we eat, to how we eat, to how much we eat, to what we drink, where we get that from, all of that, all of those things, and so much more. That's an entirely different episode. But let me bring it back. The concept of making decisions that one can be proud of. This is something that for me was hard earned. And it started for me with my relationship with money. What we do in the name of money collectively, I think, needs to be examined. Our relationship to money needs to be examined, because money is one of those things that will carry the energy that we give it. So in the name of security, in the name of greed, in the name of gambling or consuming or getting what we want in any given moment, we allow money to motivate and influence our behaviors in ways that will not end well. They never have, they never will. The fact that we often try to extract money from those who we have had personal relationships with, intimate relationships with, marriages, common law arrangements, has never made sense to me. The fact that we tried to extract money from the people who we loved when that love seems to have shifted or changed or disappeared. It doesn't sit well with me, and it's never sat well with me. Just because you spend your time in a relationship with someone should not mean that you have access to their money. Unless you went into the relationship with some sort of financial agreement saying, we each put 50-50 into this, when things go wrong, and they often will, why would we start to grasp for more than we had brought into the equation? What does that say about us? What kind of person does that make us when we try and steal material goods that, at the end of the day, only end up being stuff from someone who we used to give love to? Are our egos so fragile that we feel the need to enact revenge on someone who has given us a blow to the ego? Are we so afraid that we won't be able to stand up on our own 2 feet after a relationship ends? Do we believe that we're incapable of creating, our own life with all of the stuff that we'll have in it? Or do we feel like we need to try and fleece those who have shared their hearts with us in order to ensure our own material comfort? Now, I'm also aware that, I'm making a pretty, again, controversial and blanketing statement, because very often in relationships, one person, gives up a career, one gives up one's livelihood in order to invest in the relationship, in the business of that relationship, whether it be having children or whether it be allowing the other person to finish their education so they take time off while the other partner, works and is the primary breadwinner. I understand that there are, different facets and different aspects to this kind of situation, but ultimately, I'm not talking about those specific relationships or those specific contexts. I'm talking about people who are together, and all of a sudden, where they're not, they go after each other for each other's money and the shit they have. I think that what I'm talking about might piss off a lot of people who are listening to this, and that's okay, but I think that this is stuff that needs to be spoken about. Why are we so incapable of holding ourselves accountable and responsible for going out into the world and building our own life with all of the quote-unquote stuff in it, without depending on someone else to help us stand on our own 2 feet? What is the core belief that we hold about ourselves that convinces us that it's better to try and take someone for everything they have than to simply make it all happen on our own? What spiritual laws are we adhering to when we meet someone else's devious actions with more devious actions? Let's say in the context of someone cheated on us. Let's say we've been betrayed. How does it help us to then get devious on them? Does that not just perpetuate the energy of what pushed us into such a horrible state in the first place? If the person that we've been in an intimate relationship with gets nasty in a separation, what's better? To meet them with the same vibration of nasty, to be devious, to feed the energy of negativity, to turn into that person? Or is it better to do whatever we have to do to end the affiliation with that person so that we can be free of their energy, move on, confident, independent, maybe licking our wounds for a little bit, and that's normal, and maybe a shattered ego, but to be free of that person who eventually showed us that they weren't deserving of our time and energy? And what about when there's no devious person? What about when there's no betrayal? What about when love just dies between two people, as it sometimes does? Why do we feel the need to make someone else pay for the fact that that happened? It's not their doing. It's just what happens. It's life happening. Why would we feel the need to make someone else pay for life happening? Now, I've never been what our culture believes is good with money. I've never been a saver. I've always been content to lean on and sometimes to live on credit, overdraft, whatever I needed to, so that I could live my life the way I wanted to, which obviously isn't conducive to being what our culture thinks is good with money. It was only when I was earning enough to be able to put money aside to pay for my income tax without drawing myself deeper into debt, then I felt a sense of accomplishment, which is ridiculous considering being organized fiscally doesn't make me a better person, right? It just means that I feel more independent and capable of playing the game and sort of winning, I guess. Winning for me ultimately means not playing the game according to someone else's rules, but making my own rules and rejecting what the masses have blindly accepted as being their lot. So did being financially quote-unquote responsible really end up bringing me to a better place? Yes and no. Yes, because I now don't have to worry about how and when I'll dig myself out of debt. And because I was always very clear that no one was going to do it for me. If I carried debt, that was my responsibility to take care of, and I would take care of it and sort it out and break even, if not, go above and beyond that, within the time frame that I had for this body to be alive, right? I was going to do it within this lifetime. I was not going to leave it for someone else to sort out after I died, after my body died. So yes, it brought me to a better place because I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to worry about how I was going to dig myself out of it. But no, because I don't like caring about shit that others have decided was undesirable, but which in my own personal relationship to it has proven to simply be another aspect of living a human existence where standards and expectations are archaic and unsustainable. I do believe that the system we are set up in, especially the economic system, is not set up for the majority of us to succeed. It is set up for the majority of us to struggle and to try to keep our heads above water, to just break even, to just make ends meet. And there is this cultural conditioning that has us believe that if we can't do that, there must be something wrong with us. Well, listen, I'll tell you something. It took over 20 years of supporting myself to find myself financially able to play the game according to the structure that our culture has in place. And what I know for sure is that I think that that structure is bullshit. It exists to feed an economy whose very concepts and defining factors I believe are growing outdated with every word that I speak. I have no interest in maintaining the structure that our parents, our grandparents held hostage by, a structure that prompts those whose financial failings get out of hand to end their own lives in shame and embarrassment, that keeps some people in filth and illness while others shove gold spoons up their noses filled with illegal substances being ingested to help anesthetize them from whatever wounds they carry from worshiping false idols of material wealth and ego-based selfishness. I don't care about feeding a system that broke long ago. But that, a ton of, white people on golf courses would convince us is healthy, strong, and needs our RSP and 401k contributions. I call bullshit. And I remember the color of the skin of the body that I find myself in. Don't think that I'm, using this white person reference irresponsibly. I'm not. I call bullshit. And despite what, anybody who takes issue with what I'm saying might think of me, I'm here to tell you that you don't have to play that game to survive. Play your own game. Keep things on the legal, don't hurt anybody else with your actions or decisions, and eventually you'll find that you were perfectly okay all the while, even when that overdraft seemed to be a mark of failure. Credit, overdraft, loans, I think they're all services to take advantage of as far as I'm concerned. And for those who preach not to owe money, to always pay off your balance, I respectfully respond that when you're not making enough money to pay off those balances, when you haven't sold your soul to be able to pay off your overdraft, when you don't have the means to have all your utility bills neatly piled up in the paid pile, when, the system has been set up so that you or the cultural group that you belong to or whatever demographic you have accidentally fallen into, when the road ahead is not paved with, opportunity, you do whatever you have to do not to fall into bankruptcy and financial ruin. Use the services. State your intention to be responsible and accountable for every cent of debt that you incur, and know that with patience and perseverance, chipping away slowly at debt turns into one day not having any. And it's okay, with or without it. Carrying debt doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a flunky. It doesn't make you a fuck-up. It means that you're part of the majority of the rest of the world who do their best to make their way through a system that sets us up to fail and to struggle. Understand that failure only occurs when you prioritize what others believe to be true over what you believe to be true. Be clear, be honest with yourself. Use what you can to get what you want. No one else is going to do it for you, and no one else is going to show you the way. Don't sacrifice your quality and experience of life when you don't have to. And I know I'm speaking to people who have got children to support. And I know I'm speaking to people who are carrying, 1, 2, 3, 4 jobs, just trying to, play this game. And obviously, if you're already swimming in debt with no way of paying it back, the only way to find balance is to cut down on spending, do your best to not go deeper into that direction, find resources that can help you consolidate your debt and maybe chip away at it slowly so you don't feel like it is holding you hostage, because it shouldn't. Money should not carry the energy that makes you feel like your life is, under duress. Do what you can to keep earning money, keep the flow of income going. However, if you're depriving yourself from making the most of your life because it means that you'll owe an extra few grand to someone or somewhere, and you know that it's not going to make you go homeless or go hungry, then wake up and live. Don't buy into society's shame-based game. Rebel against it. Live now. Do it all now. No one is going to do it for you. And I'm speaking from experience because, trust me, I mean, listen, obviously, I come from privilege that very few people come from, right? I came from a lower middle class household. I at least was never aware that there were issues keeping a roof over our head. There was always a meal in front of me. I had, excellent educational opportunities while I wanted them. And I understand those privileges, and I understand that not everybody has those privileges. But I'm also saying that when it came time for me to be awake in my own life and make decisions for myself and not pursue a job that was going to leave me, numb and hating my life and just working to keep up paying money into a system that just would have me keep paying into it for the rest of my life. When I woke up, I made decisions that were not necessarily the most intelligent financial decisions in order to play the game, but they were the decisions that were right for me. And I have never, ever regretted the decisions I made. I have never thought, oh, you should have done that because it would have made you more money. Ever. I probably would not be in as good health as I am today, physically and emotionally and mentally, if I would have taken that option, because I recognized very early that it would suck the soul out of my body. So I didn't do it. So all I'm saying is make the decisions that are good for you. Make decisions that you can be proud of. In some instances, that is going to mean that you're going to have to do stuff that perhaps, isn't the ideal, but it's not the worst you could do. There is truth to the saying that sometimes you need to do something bad so that you don't do something worse. For some, cheating every now and again on their diet is the lesser of two evils when compared to holding out under the guise of, discipline. Until before you know it, they're looking at the bottom of the ice cream carton that they've just inhaled. And I know I'm jumping from money to other topics, but making decisions that one can be proud of isn't relegated to financial ones. For other people, let's say smoking, going out to smoke that cigarette is going to keep them above the line, right? Where they can maintain clarity and not lash out emotionally when triggered. Sometimes we have to make decisions that would never be encouraged by self-help gurus, but that we can be proud of, nonetheless, given our context, our circumstances, our factors. What we frequently see is that with awareness and honesty, we make decisions that shed light on who we end up being in the human experience when situations are anything but easy or normal. We see the shadow aspects of the self, the facets we would never promote or discuss, the inner beast within every single one of us that every now and again rips through the layers of taming and decorum and rears its head. So how is this helpful in transcending the bonds that keep us tied in distraction and playing the game according to other people's rules? Well, by allowing us to see all aspects of who we are in this human life, by becoming aware of them, by accepting them as one more snapshot in the moving picture that is each of our individual lives, we learn to honor them as part of the package. By doing so, we understand that sometimes we need to act in what could be seen as unflattering ways to be able to transform the energy of stress and tension that our bodies absorb into an echo of that tension. We need to shift the anger, we need to shift the fear, we need to shift the disappointment and the rage and the hurt and the jealousy and the envy. And so we allow the inner beast to operate with presence and intention, mindfully, instead of pretending we can control it all, and ending up with that inner beast eventually going on a rampage of emotional reaction. There are many reasons that we choose to consciously walk the path that we may not be proud of, which could be the path of the devious, or the path of the envious, or the selfish, or the dark. By being able to not only participate in this process, but observe it from the point of view of an objective witness, we can follow the journey of the unmanifest, so like what triggers us, that becomes the manifest, tension in the body, and then gets shifted back to the realm of the unmanifest, having the body relax, no longer being weighed down by the stress of what was affecting us. Tension needs to be released from the body. Whether you're worrying about money, whether you're worrying about your health, whether you're worrying about your job, whether you're worrying about your partner or your children, chances are the nervous system it's tweaking. And it needs to come back to default settings. Tension needs to be released from the body. Without doing so, it can result in illness. It can result in erratic behavior or both. And so the degree of the erratic behavior and the degree of the illness is something that we can infuse with intention. We can have influence over it, participating in and guiding the experience from a space of full awareness. Watching the trajectory of the energy and how it affects us is all about being able to transcend the human experience by witnessing it from the point of view of the spiritual observer. We observe without becoming absorbed in the goings-on. And in doing so, we heighten our awareness, becoming attuned to the interplay of all the energies that are at work around us, within us, that we would normally be at the mercy of instead of the witness to. What are your triggers? What triggers you? What gets you worried? What gets you stressed? What gets you in fear? You know, someone who came on one of the annual trips that I give to Greece every September told me that because of the time and the space that she had there, time and space away from her routine and daily responsibilities that typically occupied much of her cognitive and energetic space, she was able to identify her triggers. She was able to identify when she went into negative thought patterns, what external stimuli instigated the turning away from calm and easy towards amped up and reactive. And because she figured that out, she knew that she'd now be better equipped to recognize when those triggers presented themselves so she could properly respond to them, instead of just acting out the tension that they elicited without realizing the process that was unfolding through her. And it was monumental. It was monumental for me to see this come out from her, for her to tell me this, but it was monumental for her. And I believe it was so monumental for her and made her so emotional with gratitude and poignance because she was getting to know herself better. The whole point to this experience of human life is just that, to know thyself. And sometimes we get the space to do just that. But knowing thyself can also occur by being in close proximity to what Dexter used to refer to as the dark passenger. Making room for this dark passenger that we all carry with us, and ultimately are partially, allows us to follow the intuitive hunch that we unconsciously know that we often need to allow for the darker aspects to take the place they should be afforded in order to wade through them and find the ocean of peace that we ultimately are seeking. One must have experiential knowledge of the dark in order to recognize and fully appreciate the light. That's the way it works. Through all self-discovery, self-awareness, self-acceptance, and I'm saying self-discovery, self-awareness, self-acceptance with lowercase s's, comes self-discovery, capital S, self-awareness, and self-acceptance. Higher self. Through the welcoming and nurturing of who we are as human beings in any and every moment in human form, in these bodies comes the welcoming and nurturing of who we are as energetic entities animating these bodies. Through identification with the form, with the body, the name it's given and its sufferings and successes, to identification with the energetic witness to these goings-on, the observer, the indweller, the formless and unmanifest. This is the goal of every human being. To find and objectively observe the inner monsters and demons that our human tendencies trick us into identifying with, and then transcend them. To find identification with and awakening to our true nature of expansiveness, of understanding, of awareness, from feeding the forces that divide and separate us from all that is, to returning to and residing within the unifying force that has always been the seed of all that was, all that is, and all that will be. Very often it is in relationship to the aspects of the human existence that push us into worry, that push us into stress. Very often it's in those relationships that we transcend the conflict and all of a sudden realize ourselves as these energies that are just playing a human game. Joseph Campbell once said, "And where we had thought to find an abomination, we should find a god." In the aspects of who and how you have been and who and how you are and who and how you want to be, I think it's necessary to look at the relationships you have to money, to your reflection, to food, to travel, to your job, to obligation, to the economy, to any of the aspects of this human experience that potentially trigger you and elicit rather negative response, negative reactions, emotional reactions. Because if you can be in relationship to those in a different way, in an inquisitive way, in a curious way, instead of just in sort of an unconscious way, very often you'll start to realize that you can make decisions that you can be proud of in relation to whatever those aspects of the experience are. Instead of just knee-jerk reactions, you can respond wisely. And by responding wisely, you can make decisions that you can be proud of, which means that you start to change the vibration of your relationship to those aspects of the human experience. And in doing so, they don't carry the weight or the control that they had. And in doing so, you start to realize that you are not the experiences that occur around you. You are not the relationships that you have to these aspects of the human experience. You are just this energy animating this body, just trying to get through this game of life. And so I hope that in sharing what my experience has been with money, I hope that that somehow resonates with you and you sort of, I don't know, it somehow provokes some sort of thought with either money or with any other aspect of this human experience that, you know, society, culture believes should be one thing, but your experience has been something very different, because this is not shit we talk about. This is not stuff that gets put on social media. This is barely even stuff that we talk about with our closest friends. For some reason, there's this stigma around money, and there's this stigma around, you know, weight, especially if we've put on weight. There's this stigma around just aspects of the human experience that almost date back to the 1950s, when nobody talked about anything real and pretended everything was okay. And listen, yeah, there are moments where we have to shut the fuck up and get on with it. I get it. But there are going to be moments where we need to talk about this stuff. I think more people need to talk about the struggles they've had with finances, with their weight, with their jobs, with their children, with their partners, trying to stay in monogamous relationships, trying to stay in one job, trying to, you know, just basically exist. We should not have to struggle to exist. It's already a challenge, at least in the way our world is set up today. So why would we make it harder for ourselves by staying silent on subjects that we have an opinion about and that maybe we don't agree with? I know I've launched a lot at you in this episode, but I really want you to give it a think. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to get back to me and let me know what your experiences have been, and how you have navigated your way forward with it. Because ultimately, I think those are the stories. That's the shit we need to talk about and to talk to each other about. So give it a think. I'll see you later. This has been the Examine Life with Bram Levinson.